A persistent rumor akin to an episode from Black Mirror has been following JD Vance, Trump's election running mate, as it turns out many people believe he has enjoyed relations with a couch.
Is Kamala Harris brat? According to singer Charlie XCX, yep, she is.
5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Hi everyone, Atlas here. Last week we talked about Biden dropping out of the presidential race, with Kamala taking his place. Where do Kamala's campaign and her election chances stand 1 week later? Well, let me tell you this. Kamala has been absolutely cooking over the past week. There is a ton of excitement in the Democratic Party. Gotta be honest, I forgot that was something Democratic voters could feel. I'm talking smashing donation records, massive surges in the polls, and a political campaign that's actually competent with fresh new ideas. Before we get into it, I'd first like to ask that you consider taking a look at some of the links in the description. The genocide of the Palestinian people continues to rage in the Gaza Strip, devastating families and destroying livelihoods. Recently, a study conducted by experts estimated that the death toll in Gaza is much larger than previously reported, with them projecting the death toll to be around 186,000 people or more. So please consider donating to some of the charities linked below, further educating yourself, or getting involved in other ways. A ton of helpful resources are in the description for you. Thank you and enjoy the video. How does one determine the success of a campaign before election night has even happened? Well, let's take a look at the numbers. One of the biggest factors in the success of a presidential campaign is fundraising. Money helps buy advertisements, hires campaign staff, helps fundraise, helps set up field offices, and conduct internal polls. Within the first 24 hours of her campaign being announced, the Harris campaign raised over $100 million, the most money ever raised for a presidential candidate within a 24-hour span. Within the past week, that number has doubled, and according to the Harris campaign, over 66% of that sum has been from first-time donators. Within the past week, the Harris campaign has signed up over 170,000 new volunteers. As if the enthusiasm for Kamala wasn't apparent enough, 88% of Democrats say they are enthusiastic about their candidate this election, according to a recent poll by Ipsos. Considering the Biden campaign was virtually dead in the water a week ago, that is incredibly significant. What about the polls? Well, relatively speaking, they're pretty damn good. Joe Biden was trailing Trump by a substantial margin, around 9 or 10 points. Now, the polls show that the race is basically a dead heat at this moment, and keep in mind this bump in the polls happened within the span of a week, and there are still around 100 days left till Election Day. These polls have been taken before the Democratic Convention, before a VP has been selected, and before Trump and Kamala have even debated each other. And that makes it very scary for the Trump campaign because they have so much room to grow and get those poll numbers up. Also, in case it wasn't already obvious, Kamala has the nomination locked down. So that begs the question, why? Why is Kamala doing so well? Well, you could chalk it up to the Democratic Party being very enthusiastic to have a candidate that isn't a dinosaur. And that definitely has played a role in things, I won't lie. But I believe that that isn't the only reason. The reason Kamala is doing so well is, well, because Kamala is brat. Let me explain. Earlier this week, Charlie XCX, a very talented music artist, by the way, tweeted something very simple, but also unimaginably profound. Kamala is brat. Well, what does that mean? Well, brat in this tweet refers to the smash hit album by Charlie XCX titled Brat. And you should listen to it. It's really damn good, I gotta be honest. Some would even go as far as to call it the album of the summer. To put it plainly, what Charlie is saying here is that Kamala is a girl boss. She's a badass who does whatever the hell she wants. And this tweet blew up and became a huge meme, and eventually it worked its way up to the Harris campaign staff and it became a part of their marketing. And it seems to really work. Now, obviously I'm being a little sarcastic when I say the reason Kamala is performing so well is because she's brat. But what this whole feminine phenomenon demonstrates is a massive shift in not only the Harris campaign's marketing, but also where their priorities lie. See, unlike Joe Biden, Kamala isn't a complete and utter moron. Instead of trying and failing to outflank the right on immigration and racism, the Harris campaign knows that young people and their turnout are a massive part of any successful Democratic campaign. In sharp contrast to previous campaigns, Kamala is not only prioritizing younger voters, but also trying to reconcile with them. What do I mean by that? See, unlike Biden, Kamala can read the room pretty clearly. She is fairly well aware that young voters have a fair share of grievances with the Biden campaign. Young voters have been discouraged to vote for the Biden ticket for a variety of reasons, such as failure to implement student debt forgiveness, Biden's racist rhetoric on immigrants, and also just his age. He's old. But the biggest grievance young people have with the Biden-Harris administration is their involvement in the ongoing genocide in the Gaza Strip. Kamala is trying to reconcile with young voters over this grievance. Kamala is breaking with Biden on the issue of Gaza. It's been reported that Kamala and Biden have long disagreed internally on the White House's Gaza policy. Over the past week, however, she's taken considerable steps to distance herself from Biden's policy on Gaza. First of all, she decided not to attend Netanyahu's congressional address. The White House officially said this was due to a scheduling conflict, but I personally don't believe that, and that's definitely not how the media interpreted it. The congressional address came and went, incredibly disturbing stuff. I mean, they were basically cheering on like Adolf Hitler. But while the address was going on, the Capitol building was surrounded by protesters protesting the ongoing genocide and the fact that our representatives were just giving standing ovations to Israel's prime minister regardless. You know, there was some flag burning and some good old-fashioned police brutality. And Kamala put out a statement condemning what had happened, which seems counter to the narrative that she's trying to distance herself from Biden's Gaza policy. But let me explain a few things. On your first read of this letter, it's definitely not great. However, what exactly is she condemning here? Obviously, the rhetoric is less than ideal, but she really only seems to condemn three things. 1. Sympathizing with Hamas, i.e. sporting Hamas flags and the like. 2. Property damage that occurred that day, which is par for the course for most politicians, let's be honest. And 3, the burning of the American flag. Once again, not exceptional stuff. Definitely the rhetoric isn't great at all. But relative to most of the statements and rhetoric from the White House, it seems a little tame. The second point I'll make in the form of a question. Would you have seen or heard this statement had I not told you about it? Maybe if you had followed some leftist accounts on Twitter and had happened to check your timeline that day. But other than maybe stumbling upon it on Twitter or hearing a little snippet about it in an article, you probably wouldn't have seen it. And most likely, the average voter didn't see it either, because that's exactly the point. This is supposed to be low-key, and it's meant to keep her in the good graces of the average Zionist Democratic voter. It's meant to be something she can point to as proof she stands with Israel in a debate or if she comes under scrutiny. What you are far more likely to have seen, however, is this clip of Kamala's televised address that day.
I also expressed with the Prime Minister my serious concern about the scale of human suffering in Gaza, including the death of far too many innocent civilians. And I made clear my serious concern about the dire humanitarian situation there, with over 2 million people facing high levels of food insecurity, and 500,000 people facing catastrophic levels of acute food insecurity. What has happened in Gaza over the past 9 months is devastating. The images of dead children and desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety, sometimes displaced for the second, third, or fourth time. We cannot look away in the face of these tragedies. We cannot allow ourselves to become numb to the suffering and I will not be silent.
Now, that statement is much better than any sort of statement the White House has ever made on Gaza. Obviously, it's not like she's calling for the dismantling of Israeli apartheid and the Israeli apartheid state or whatever, unfortunately, but it's a major shift in rhetoric. She's not only actually talking about the severe devastation in Gaza and the countless videos of suffering children coming out online, she's also saying it's on Netanyahu to accept the ceasefire, that he's the last obstacle to peace and not Hamas. And that says a lot. That's completely different than what the White House has been saying for months now. And voters who were turned off by Biden's handling of Gaza can look at this address and say, oh, I guess Kamala is a little bit better than Biden. Maybe she'll actually commit to a ceasefire or pressure Netanyahu when she's president. It's a bit of an easier sell for some of those voters who voted uncommitted in the primaries. Also, Kamala is a fair bit further left than Biden ever was, so she'll be promoting policies that are more energizing to the Democratic base and just young people in general. The point I'm trying to make here is that obviously Kamala is paying a lot more attention to the concerns of younger voters, which I'm sure had a big role in her success so far. Her ability to play both sides of the coin on issues shows she has some pretty good political instincts, and the fact that the Harris campaign retained most of the Biden campaign's staff shows their staff had the capability to do this sort of work all along, but they were held back under Biden. And honestly, if I had to bet on who would win the election in November, I would bet on Kamala. Of course, there's a lot of room for things to change, but at this hour, it seems like her campaign is on the right track. Now, there was a little bit more I wanted to discuss, but if I'm being honest, this script is already pretty long, and I'd like to have this video out by tonight, so I think, unfortunately, that's all I have for you today in this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Please consider leaving a like, commenting, and subscribing if you enjoyed, as well as checking out some of those links in the description. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.